This isn't the Wild West you saw in movies. This is the version they didn't want you to know. It's hot, not charming cowboy hot, but desert wind in your teeth, dirt in your eyes, sweating under a bandana hot. You're crouched behind a boulder, dry lips pressed together, the metal of a revolver digging into your ribs. Down below, a train whistles, too perfect, too scheduled, like a rich man's heartbeat before it's stolen from him. Butch Cassidy stands a few feet ahead, calm as sunrise. He's not the snarling villain you expected. He looks more like a mischievous uncle at a family barbecue, if that uncle was also about to blow open a safe. There's a lopsided grin on his face as he signals you forward. The dynamite's already set. You're not sure if this is a moment for bravery, or if you simply stopped fearing outcomes. And just like that, the world cracks. The explosion punches your ears. And now you're in it, smoke, shouting, hoofbeats, adrenaline, cash sacks tossed down, horses tugging at reins, time melting like butter on a black skillet. If you blink, you might miss the fact that nobody's been shot yet. Butch has a rule about unnecessary blood. Doesn't mean it's never spilled. Just means he likes options. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck into the saddle, your horse already knowing the drill. Butch leads, Sundance right behind him. You follow, the train already vanishing behind clouds of smoke and startled prairie birds. Your heart rattles inside you like a coin in a canteen. The outlaw life wasn't supposed to be this charming. Butch Cassidy, real name Robert Leroy Parker, has a way of making criminality feel like a lifestyle choice. Born in 1866 to a hard-working Mormon family in Beaver, Utah, he was the eldest of 13 children. Historians still argue whether his religious upbringing sharpened his sense of morality, or simply gave him something to rebel against. Either way, the desert carved his edges early. He wasn't a drunk, not much of a gambler, either. Butch had a weakness for two things: horses and planning, which might explain why he was never the first to shoot, but always the first to escape. And he hated being called a bandit. He thought of himself as a businessman, just one who skipped the tedious paperwork. You remember the first time he told you his favorite quote: "I would much rather rustle a few cows than sell shoes to fools." He said it while chewing jerky and staring at a horizon you couldn't quite see. The early 1890s were chaos in boots. The country was changing, railroads stitching the West into something less wild. That meant more rules, more fences, and fewer places to vanish. Butch thrived in the in-between. A mainstream fact you might not know: Butch worked on legitimate ranches in his youth. He even tried cowboying for a time in Wyoming. He had a job, he got paid, he didn't like it, the pay was too low, the hours too long, and the bosses too bossy. But then he met Mike Cassidy, a local horse thief with a grin twice as crooked as Butch's. Mike taught young Robert the art of quiet theft. The Cassidy name, yeah, stolen too. Robert Parker becomes Butch Cassidy, like a snake shedding its skin to become more interesting. One fringe story says Butch once returned a stolen pair of boots to a rancher, apologizing and leaving a $5 gold piece behind. That sounds suspiciously polite for a thief, but if it were anyone else, you'd call it a myth. With Butch, feels about right. His first confirmed bank robbery came in 1889, the San Miguel Valley Bank in Telluride, Colorado. You still smell the fresh paint on the vault, the oil from the safe's gears, the newly printed bills in your gloves. He got away with $20, a small fortune at the time. No shots fired, no witnesses hurt, just the precise timing of a man who viewed clocks as allies, not obstacles. Butch didn't ride alone for long. In fact, he hated lone wolf theatrics. Too dramatic, too messy. He preferred cooperation, communication, reliable horses. He liked making jokes while escaping the law. He once sent a thank you note to a bank clerk for his excellent customer service. Whether he actually mailed it is up for debate, but it stayed in the legend pile all the same. The law, though, was never far. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, basically the 19th century's version of the FBI if the FBI also rode horses and grew truly terrifying moustaches, was already keeping tabs. They started tracking Butch's movements across states. Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico. They followed the smoke trails and shell casings he never quite left behind. And you start feeling like maybe you shouldn't be so comfortable with this. There's a flicker of guilt when you hold a stolen bill in your hand. But Butch makes it hard to stay mad. He keeps telling you about corporate greed, about railroad monopolies, about the rich stealing from the poor with a fountain pen instead of a pistol. You want to argue, but the dust in your mouth tastes like truth. Some say Butch avoided unnecessary violence because of his Mormon roots. Others say it was just good business. The less you kill, the more people remember you as a folk hero, not a criminal, and if they like you, they won't help the law. Makes you wonder, are you helping? Or just watching from inside the story? Too far gone to turn back? The horses gallop through a canyon now. The sound of pursuit already faint, like a distant echo of morality. You don't know where you're headed next, but you trust Butch, for better or worse. The desert gives way to red cliffs and juniper shadows as you follow Butch westward. You've just helped rob a train, dodged a posse, and now you're camped beneath stars so sharp they look carved into the sky. Butch is unbothered, feet up, chewing a blade of dry grass, telling a story about the time he got chased by a cow. Not a bull, a cow, and it won. But the story that really matters isn't this campfire one, it's the one that started it all. Back in Utah, Robert Leroy Parker was born in 1866 in Beaver, a speck of a town built on faith, livestock, and wagon wheels. His parents were Mormon immigrants, honest to a fault, scraping out a living in a place that didn't give away much for free. You were either blessed or stubborn. The Parkers were both. Robert, never Butch, back then, was the oldest of 13 children. That's right, 13. Privacy was a myth. So was silence. He grew up learning to ride, fence, tend to animals, and respect his elders. That last part didn't stick too well. By the time he was a teenager, he was already sneaking off to local rodeos and saloons, wide-eyed and grinning. Historians still argue whether young Robert was drawn to crime out of necessity or boredom. Some say his family struggled with debt, and he wanted to help. Others think he just didn't want to become another nameless farmer feeding cows until his back gave out. You can't exactly blame him. Not when you see how he lit up at the smell of saddle leather and fresh gunpowder. A mainstream fact for your collection. Robert once worked at a dairy farm near Circleville. His employer, a cranky rancher who paid in dusty coins and bad attitude, refused to extend him credit at the local store. One day, Robert borrowed a pair of pants and a pie without permission. He left a note explaining he'd pay later. He was charged with theft. The case was later dismissed, but the label stuck, troublemaker. That moment, the pants, the pie, the note, might have been the first crack in the church-approved version of his life. A boy who wouldn't play by the script. He respected the idea of rules, just not the execution. They were too rigid, too easy to abuse, so he started writing his own. It was around this time that he met Mike Cassidy, a lean, sharp-eyed rancher and part-time outlaw with a reputation for charming the boots off a deputy. Mike took a liking to Robert. He taught him how to ride hard, shoot straight, and disappear when things got hot. Robert soaked it up like dry sand in a rainstorm. The name Butch came from a brief stint in a Rock Springs butcher shop, because yes, before he was a criminal mastermind. Your guy literally cut meat for a living. Not exactly glamorous, but it gave him the nickname that stuck harder than his actual surname. And when he finally went full outlaw, he tacked on Cassidy as a nod to his mentor. From Robert Parker to Butch Cassidy. And just like that, the desert had a new name echoing through its canyons. Butch didn't leap straight into robbery. He tested the waters first, illegally selling horses, helping fence stolen goods, scouting for gangs. He had a knack for logistics, which sounds boring until you're trying to get 5 outlaws, 6 horses, and 2 bags of dynamite across a state line without dying. One fringe detail people forget: Butch had a deep love for books. He carried paperbacks in his saddlebag. Westerns. Ironically, he liked Twain. He said it helped him understand people better. And it was a good way to pass time when hiding in a canyon for 3 days waiting for a bank to calm down. His first arrest came in 1894. He was caught with a stolen horse, saddle, and firearm in Wyoming, sentenced to 2 years in the Laramie Penitentiary. You might think prison would harden him, make him mean, but not Butch. He used the time to think, make connections, and, as the story goes, win over the warden by being surprisingly polite for an inmate. That's straight from a prison guard's journal. When he walked out of that prison in 1896, Butch wasn't broken. He was refined, smarter, smoother. If crime was a career, he'd just completed an internship, and he was ready to build something bigger than himself. It's around this time you start noticing a shift in his voice. Less rambling, more calculating, less, maybe, more, when he's thinking big now. Banks, railroads. He doesn't just want to survive, he wants to embarrass the institutions that think they can't be touched. Back at the fire, Butch tosses you a hunk of jerky and asks what you think of Montana. You shrug. He nods. Could be good for laying low. He's always planning 5 steps ahead. That's the difference between a thief and a legend. You catch a glint in his eye. That odd mix of childlike mischief and full-grown rebellion. He isn't a killer, not yet, but he's becoming something else, something the law doesn't have a name for yet. A gentleman bandit, a criminal with PR sense. The kind of outlaw you almost root for. Almost. Some nights, you wonder what would have happened if the rancher had just let him buy that pie on credit. Would Robert have married a local girl, raised chickens, died of boredom? But then the wind kicks up, blowing embers skyward like fireflies, and Butch is already drawing roots in the dirt with a stick. The future is a map, and you're on it now. The next morning, your boots are caked in red clay, and your thighs ache from another full day in the saddle. Butch whistles as he rides ahead, humming a tune that doesn't match the terrain. He doesn't seem tired, he seems charged, like the world has just handed him its secrets. By now, you've learned that Butch Cassidy didn't wake up one day and say, "Time to rob banks for a living." No, it was slower than that. More insidious, more like erosion. First, it was the boring jobs, tending ranches in Wyoming, moving cattle across bone-dry plains, being paid in coins that couldn't buy dinner. Then came the temptations. Horses were valuable, saddles, more so, and the law was far away. You don't need to steal from a bank to be an outlaw. Sometimes all it takes is trading one borrowed mare across state lines. It's easy to pretend it's harmless, until someone puts up a wanted poster with your buddy's face on it. Butch knew the value of 2 things better than most: good horses and good people. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he knew who was. He started building connections, men who owed him favors, or just liked the way he smiled and didn't shoot anyone without a reason. You're not sure how you got pulled into this crew. One minute you were shoveling manure behind a tavern. The next you were loading rifles for a man who quotes Shakespeare between heists. A mainstream historical fact: ranch jobs in the American West during the 1880s paid about $30 a month. That's barely enough to feed yourself, let alone a family. And Butch, he had siblings to support. He wrote home now and then, sending what he could. There's one surviving letter that ends with, "I'm not as lost as you might fear. Just headed the long way around." You read that and wonder if he believed it, or just wanted someone else to. There's a period in his early 20s when Butch lived near Browns Park, a remote region straddling Utah and Colorado. It was a no-man's land for drifters, rustlers, and those wanting to vanish without questions. You could live there for months without seeing a lawman. or a preacher, just coyotes, rattlesnakes, and the sound of wind cutting through cottonwood trees. He took odd jobs, helped drive cattle, rode fences, got in bar fights that ended with laughs instead of bullets. Butch was the kind of guy who'd buy you a drink after you punched him. He didn't hold grudges, he just remembered everything. Historians still argue whether his time at Browns Park was when he began assembling his first real gang. The names changed depending on who you ask: Elsie Lay, Matt Warner, George Flat Nose Curry. Some were criminals, others were cowhands with flexible morals. All of them had one thing in common: they trusted Butch. And he trusted them back. There's a fringe tale told by a retired deputy that Butch once stopped a shootout by offering both sides whiskey and telling a story about a mule who could outshoot its owner. The story was nonsense, but everyone laughed, and the guns stayed holstered. You've seen him do things like that. His power isn't in the pistol, it's in the pause before anyone pulls the trigger. Eventually, the job started to escalate. A stagecoach here, a safe there, nothing messy, nothing stupid. Butch treated crime like carpentry: measure twice, cut once. He'd sit with a map for hours, tracing train lines and water sources with a fingertip, muttering about terrain and escape windows. Your first real job with him was robbing a general store that also functioned as a telegraph station. Butch timed it so perfectly. The sheriff was still eating breakfast when you were halfway to the border. You remember the way he tipped his hat to the clerk afterward. No hard feelings, he'd said, tossing back a silver coin for damages. It's not that Butch didn't understand consequences. He did, he just had a philosophy: the world was already rigged. The rich men built the fences, hoarded the water, and controlled the banks, so stealing from them wasn't theft, it was redistribution. He wouldn't have used that word, but you could hear it in the way he spat whenever someone mentioned the railroad companies. The Union Pacific, the Rio Grande, they were his villains. Trains were symbols of progress, sure, but also of displacement, greed, and towns that sprang up just to be bled dry and abandoned. You can't romanticize that when you've watched a rancher lose everything because some eastern investor decided his land needed a track. Butch never targeted small banks. He never robbed farmers, only the big fish. That was the line he drew, and he stuck to it. Mostly. Still, the noose of notoriety was tightening. After Telluride, he had a price on his head, and the Pinkertons were sharpening their knives. He began moving more cautiously, testing new members, varying his routes. The trust circle got smaller, the jokes quieter, the plans longer. But you can tell, he's still enjoying himself. There's a boyish thrill when he outlines a heist, a gleam in his eye that says, what if we really pull this off? You wonder how many more times he'll roll those dice. One night, while hiding out in a mining camp, you ask him if he regrets not staying on the straight path. He shrugs and says, I like open spaces, don't find many of those in a banker's office. Then he pulls a harmonica from his saddlebag and plays a song so haunting it silences even the coyotes. The truth is, Butch Cassidy didn't fall into outlawry. He wandered into it, step by dusty step, with eyes wide open. And now, you're walking beside him. You're not sure how long it's been since you last slept in a bed. Your spine's reshaped to match a saddle, and the only pillow you've had is your rolled-up coat. Butch, though, he looks fresh as rain. Today he's sketching a layout in the dirt with a stick, an overhead of some tiny desert town you've never heard of but are definitely going to rob. He's not alone anymore. Sitting beside him, legs crossed, is a tall, wiry man with a permanent squint and the steadiest hands you've ever seen. That's Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, better known by the nickname that would etch him into outlaw legend, the Sundance Kid. There's no dramatic moment when they meet, no lightning in the sky or duel that ends in mutual respect. It's quieter than that, pragmatic. They find themselves in the same orbit, men with similar skills and complementary flaws. Butch is the schemer, Sundance is the hammer, and you're along for the ride. Again, historians still argue whether they became friends by chance or strategy. Maybe it was both. What's clear is this: they were opposites who worked. Butch with his smirking charm and ideas that sounded impossible. Sundance with his 1,000-yard stare, quiet loyalty, and an aim so precise it gave grown marshals stomach ulcers. Sundance was born in Pennsylvania, but he took to the West like a fish to whiskey. His nickname came after serving time for stealing a horse in Sundance, Wyoming. That's the sanitized version. The longer version involves a saloon brawl, a deputy, and a poker game no one ever finished. You watch them together and can't help noticing the rhythm. Butch talks, Sundance watches. Butch jokes, Sundance loads the guns. Butch plans, Sundance nods once, and that's enough. They trust each other more than most men trust their own shadows. There's a fringe story that Sundance once saved Butch from a lynch mob by pretending to be a traveling preacher, distracting the crowd with an impromptu sermon until Butch could sneak away disguised as an old woman. Sounds absurd, but given the man's talent for poker faces, it's not entirely off the table. The Wild West loves its duos, Wyatt and Doc, Jesse and Frank, but Butch and Sundance weren't about glory, they were about the job. That's what made them dangerous. Together, they started attracting others. LZ Lay, the right-hand man with a heart as conflicted as a preacher's diary. Kid Curry, a hothead with a temper like lit gunpowder. Ben Kilpatrick, Will Carver, Laura Bullion, a revolving door of talents and vices. And slowly, what began as a crew turned into something bigger. The Wild Bunch. That's what the press called you. You didn't name yourselves that. It just stuck. And it wasn't entirely accurate. You weren't wild. You were strategic. Clean cuts. Well-timed escapes. You weren't blowing up trains with sticks of dynamite for kicks. You were doing it because banks didn't hand over ledgers voluntarily. Still, the nickname worked. People whispered it in saloons and train stations. Mothers warned their children. Deputies sat up straighter. You became myth before you were even properly wanted men. A mainstream fact: the Wild Bunch pulled off the longest string of successful train and bank robberies in US history up to that point. It wasn't just luck, it was organization. Horses were swapped ahead of time. Safe houses lined escape routes. Scouts were paid to mislead marshals. Butch was always 3 moves ahead. Sundance was always watching the rear. You remember one particular job in Wilcox, Wyoming, a train carrying payroll for a major mining company. Midnight strike, charges placed, the safe cracked, clean getaway, no deaths. Later, the Union Pacific Railroad offered a reward of $10 for your heads, alive or dead. That's a terrifying number. It makes you feel important. And also, doomed. Some of the crew liked the chaos, Kid Curry especially. He had a reputation for shooting before thinking. And your blood ran a little colder every time he smiled. But Butch kept him in line. Mostly, his charisma was the leash. And you saw it time and time again, how one word from Butch could cool boiling tempers. Historians still debate whether Butch genuinely believed he could keep the gang nonviolent. Some say he was an idealist in a brutal world. Others believe it was all performance, that he just wanted to look clean for the newspapers. You've ridden beside him long enough to know the truth sits somewhere in between. He hated killing, but he loved winning. One night, holed up in a box canyon, you find the gang passing around a stolen newspaper. Butch reads the headline aloud. The Wild Bunch strikes again. Then he chuckles and says, "Sounds like we're a circus act." LZ asks if there'll be popcorn at the next job. Someone else makes shadow puppets on the canyon wall. You all laugh, because the world's decided you're legends. And legends don't get tired. But inside, you wonder how long this can last. You see the strain in Butch's eyes. Even as he jokes, you see the way Sundance checks his pistol a few extra times. You feel it in the way the posse trackers are getting better. Closer, bolder. Butch once told you, the secret isn't outrunning the law, it's making them chase you somewhere you already left. Smart words, but even he knows you can't keep that up forever. The noose tightens, even if it's invisible for now. And yet, you ride again, because Butch is smiling, because Sundance hasn't missed yet, because maybe, just maybe, The next job will be the last one you need. You pull your hat down, tighten your saddle, and ride into the night, not knowing that what you're really doing is stepping deeper into history. The wind smells like mesquite and gun oil. You ride behind Butch and Sundance through an empty gulch, hooves muffled by soft sand. The sun hangs low, throwing long shadows across your path like spilled ink. You've robbed, escaped, and laughed your way through more crimes than you can count, and you're not even halfway through the ride. By now, the Wild Bunch isn't just a rumor. It's a rolling, chaotic enterprise. Banks are getting nervous. Train companies are hiring armed guards. Pinkerton detectives are stashing your names in thick, sweat-stained ledgers. And Butch, he's thriving. See, Butch Cassidy wasn't a mad dash, shoot 'em up kind of bandit. He was a strategist. While other gangs leaned on chaos and intimidation, Butch turned crime into choreography. Everyone had a role. Timings were rehearsed. Escape routes were scouted weeks in advance. You weren't just robbing banks, you were executing plans that could have impressed military generals. You're about to rob another train. Not your first, not your last, but this one, it's different. Butch has that look in his eye again, the same one he gets when a plan is too smooth, too perfect, like he's daring the universe to blink first. He divides the team into pairs. Sundance takes the lead crew. Butch handles the timing. You're in the relay group, responsible for switching the getaway horses, already stashed 2 days ago in a cottonwood grove. If this works, you'll be 10 miles away before the law even lights their lanterns. Mainstream historical fact: the Wild Bunch used relay stations to outpace their pursuers. They'd pre-position fresh horses every 10 to 15 miles, allowing them to maintain full speed while posses, stuck with exhausted mounts, struggled to keep up. It was a brilliant tactic. Horses were their gas stations, their lifeline, their insurance policies. The train heist goes exactly as planned, until it doesn't. A guard panics, fires early, a bullet ricochets past your ear. Sundance reacts like lightning, neutralizing the threat with a single shot. Clean, controlled, still, the sound echoes into the hills. You can already feel the posse's ears twitching, their saddles creaking. Butch doesn't flinch. He grabs the payroll satchel, nods to the others, and you vanish into the canyon as if you'd never existed. This is life with the Wild Bunch. Professional outlawry, as absurd as that sounds. There's a code to the crew, unspoken, but binding. No killing unless absolutely necessary. No betrayal, no glory hounding, and, above all, respect the plan. Butcher's plan, always. You've seen him rework an escape route 5 times because of a new telegraph office. You've watched him argue for hours over a single train's schedule. Timing, he once muttered, is the difference between wealth and a funeral. He was right. That night, back at a hidden camp somewhere near Hole in the Wall, you count the take, $50 in cash and bonds. Enough to disappear, maybe, but none of you are ready to hang up your spurs. The thrill's still too sweet. Hole in the Wall isn't a metaphor. It's real, a rugged, hidden pass in the Bighorn Mountains of Wyoming. The Wild Bunch used it as a sanctuary. Natural defenses, high ground, limited access. You could hold off a battalion with a handful of rifles if needed. Even the Pinkertons hesitated to come knocking. There's a fringe theory that Hole in the Wall functioned almost like a temporary outlaw society. Different gangs coexisted there, sharing supplies and information, even setting basic rules to avoid bloodshed between crews. No official flag, no votes, but still, a kind of dusty democracy with loaded guns and canned beans. You walk among tents and lean-tos. Elsie's boiling coffee. Laura Bullion's oiling a saddle. Sundance is playing cards with Kid Curry, who's somehow losing and threatening to shoot the deck. It's a strange harmony, a chorus of bad decisions and borrowed time. Historians still argue whether Butch was the leader of the Wild Bunch, or just the most charismatic voice in the room. Some say it was democratic. Others insist he was a benevolent dictator in spurs. Either way, when Butch talked, people listened, and not just outlaws, ranchers. townsfolk, even the occasional sheriff with a gambling habit. You once watched Butch talk a deputy out of arresting him by offering him a free meal and a seat at the fire. The man left 2 hours later with a full belly, slightly drunk, and zero idea what had just happened. That was Butch's gift. He made lawmen feel like neighbors, made neighbors feel like friends, and made you feel like, maybe, this whole criminal enterprise wasn't as bad as the newspapers said. But the Pinkertons don't write poetry. They write warrants. And they've started tracking your movements with terrifying accuracy. You hear names whispered: Charlie Siringo, the agent with 1,000 disguises. Others, too, men who eat gravel and bleed ink. Dogged and joyless. Always behind you by just one day. Butch shrugs it off. They're still chasing our shadows, he says, but you see him writing more notes now, burning more maps, sleeping less. Still, he's got a plan. He always has a plan. A new job in the works. A big one. Maybe the one. You help him prep. Folding a stolen train schedule. Marking a bend in the rails near Folsom. He talks logistics while stirring beans with a stolen spoon. Sundance tosses a rock into the fire, nodding at all the right moments. And for a second, you believe it, that this could go on forever. That there's always another plan. Another perfect getaway, another canyon to vanish into. But somewhere deep in your boots, you feel it shifting. The world's getting smaller. And Butch, he's already wondering where to run next. You're riding with your collar turned up, bandana pulled over your mouth, and fingers tight around the reins. The moon's a sickle above you, slicing the sky with a thin silver grin. Butch and Sundance ride ahead, quiet as ghosts. The train's already behind you, lighter by a few $1,000s. Heavier with risk. The Wild Bunch has perfected the train job. Smooth, fast, efficient, and always in motion. You don't stick around to admire your work. You vanish into the dust before the conductor even finishes swearing. But lately, things are changing. Telegraph wires hum with urgency. Marshals ride harder. Deputies seem younger and cockier. Like they think they've read the ending already. And you know why. The Pinkertons. You've heard the name for years. But now it's more than a name. It's a force. A cold, methodical, money-backed hunt. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency was founded in 1850. But by the late 1890s, it's a full-blown private army. Hired by railroads, banks, and any rich man who's lost a little too much sleep over your crew. Mainstream historical fact, the Pinkertons employed thousands of agents, including former lawmen, Civil War veterans, and specialists in undercover intelligence. They had their own databases, coded files, and reward networks. Some say they were better funded than the US Marshals at the time. And now, they've got your names: Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid, LZ Lay, Kid Curry. They've started sending circulars with grainy photos and reward numbers that keep climbing like bad bets at a poker table. One even lists Butch at $15 dead or alive. You're not sleeping easy these days. Back at camp, Butch is poring over maps again. He's not panicking, not his style, but there's tension in his posture. A stiffness you've only seen once before. Right before that job in Montpellier when the town nearly closed in on you like a bear trap. Sundance notices too, says nothing, just sharpens his knives and checks the saddlebags twice. That's his version of panic, quiet readiness. You match it. A fringe detail floats up in conversation that night. Someone heard a Pinkerton agent recently rode into a Colorado town disguised as a cattle buyer, only to burn down a known outlaw safehouse the next day. The message is clear. The law isn't coming with a badge and a warrant anymore. It's coming with fire. Butch still keeps his humor. He jokes about mailing himself to Argentina and starting a new life selling goats. The others laugh. But you see it. He's not joking that much. The idea of leaving's become less absurd. You ask him about it later. Just the two of you under a cottonwood tree. He says, every man's got to outrun his story. At least once. Otherwise, it owns you. Then he taps his temple. But they're using those now. He says, meaning the telegraphs. That's the real enemy. Wires in the air. He's not wrong. Historians still debate how much telegraphy changed outlaw tactics. Some say it forced smarter planning. Others argue it pushed men like Butch to take bigger, riskier jobs with faster exits. Either way, you can feel the shift. Lawmen aren't hours behind you anymore, they're minutes. That's why Butch starts targeting remote routes. Less infrastructure, fewer wires, more silence. He avoids towns with new train depots and hires scouts who can read the land like a diary. It's all about time. Buy time, you buy life. And yet, for all the danger pressing in, Butch is still Butch. He makes jokes about the rail barons. Calls one a walrus with a monocle and too many maps. He even leaves a note after one robbery, scrawled on a scrap of ledger paper, "Thanks for the donation. Invest in faster trains." But the tension's building, and you know it won't break clean. During one particularly close escape near Tipton, Wyoming, you and the crew ditch the loot, scatter across the hills, and spend 3 days drinking rainwater from a boot. The posse missed you by less than an hour. You hear one of them found a dropped bullet pouch with Butch's initials burned into the leather. Butch shrugs. Maybe they'll sell it on a souvenir stand someday. Another train job, this one near Folsom, goes perfectly. Except when the Pinkertons arrive the next morning. They already know which direction you ran. They bring dogs. One of them even has a bicycle. A bicycle. In the desert. The gang holes up in a shack for a week. Everyone's jumpy. Kid Curry nearly shoots a cow for mooing too loud. Butch keeps morale up, telling stories about the time he tried selling soap in Salt Lake, about the banker who fainted before he even saw the gun, about a dream he had once, where he lived in a quiet town, wore clean clothes, and nobody asked questions. You all laugh, but no one believes it anymore. One night, a Pinkerton agent named Charlie Siringo shows up in a nearby town. You hear about it from a ranch hand who owes Butch a favor. Siringo doesn't ask questions. He just looks at people, makes them sweat. He buys a bottle of whiskey, downs it, and writes something in a little black book. Butch goes pale. Siringo's the real deal. There's a debate. Stay or go. Risk or run. Butch makes the call. We leave the country. It hangs in the air like thunder. Not forever, he says. Just long enough to cool the scent. South. Argentina. Farmland. Clean records. A new start. Historians still argue whether this was a desperate move or a brilliant pivot. Some say Butch felt cornered. Others claim it was always part of the plan. Maybe a bit of both. But you saddle up. Again, you ride beside him into another unknown, knowing the wild bunch might be living on borrowed time. And the Pinkertons, they're not far behind. The air smells of iron and ink, fresh newspaper pages flapping in a breeze. A photograph of Butch Cassidy front and center. You read the caption aloud, "Leader of the wild bunch, armed, dangerous, and disturbingly polite." You'd laugh, but it's accurate. Butch isn't just an outlaw anymore. He's a brand, a myth, and what sets him apart isn't the violence, it's the etiquette. You remember the first time you watched him rob a bank. He opened the door for a woman carrying a basket of laundry, tipped his hat, apologized to the clerk for the inconvenience. Then he pulled his revolver and calmly asked everyone to get on the floor. No yelling, no threats, just business. He once told you, fear is easy, respect is rare. And that, right there, is Butch Cassidy in a single sentence. See, while other outlaws relied on brute force or sheer chaos, Butch worked by charm and precision. He treated robberies like transactions. You weren't stealing, you were relocating assets. As he liked to joke. A mainstream historical fact, during the gang's heyday, Butch reportedly left notes at some of the banks he hit. Often witty, sometimes sarcastic. In one story, possibly apocryphal but too good not to believe, he allegedly left a note that read, "You can restock your safe now. We'll give you a head start." He had rules. Don't rob the same town twice. Don't shoot unless absolutely necessary. Don't harm civilians. And always, always, say, please, and, thank you. You once asked him if the politeness was an act. He looked genuinely offended. You can be a gentleman and a criminal. He said, it's not illegal to have manners. The crew respected it, even if they didn't always understand it. Kid Curry rolled his eyes. Sundance just shrugged. LZ lay. He started carrying a pocket watch and tipping his hat too. It became part of the brand. And it worked. People remembered Butch, not with fear, but with fascination. Townsfolk would argue over who actually saw him, who got to talk to him. It was like being robbed by a celebrity. The kind of guy who might steal your money but fix your fence before leaving. There's a fringe tale told in a small New Mexico town. Butch robbed their bank, then donated a portion of the take to a struggling widow in the area. No one's ever verified it, but the story lives on, and let's be honest, it sounds like something he would do. But this politeness, this outlaw etiquette, it wasn't just about image. It was strategy. Fear creates enemies. Respect, that buys you silence. And in a world where the law depends on witnesses and gossip, silence is gold. You recall one job where Butch literally tipped the teller after taking the money, flipping a silver coin onto the counter and saying, "For your trouble." The poor guy later told reporters, "He was nicer than my boss." It's strange riding with a man who can plan a train robbery down to the minute, then spend 20 minutes grooming his horse afterward. Butch had standards. Clean saddles, sharp clothes, fresh bandanas. "We may be outlaws," he once said, "but we're not slobs." There's something almost theatrical about it, like he's performing not just for the gang, or the victims, but for history itself, as if he knows people will tell these stories someday, and he wants them to sound good. Historians still argue whether Butch crafted this image deliberately or if it was just who he was. Was the charm calculated, or natural? Did he want to be remembered as likable, or did he just happen to be? One thing's certain, it worked. While other gang leaders were hunted like dogs, Butch inspired fascination. Kids played "Wild Bunch" in the dirt. Newspaper readers secretly rooted for him. Even some lawmen admitted, privately, they admired his cleverness. Of course, the cracks started to show. The Pinkertons didn't care about charm. They cared about results. And they were tired of chasing a bandit who could rob a train without leaving a footprint. They started getting meaner, stricter, roughing up townsfolk, pressuring family members, putting up bigger rewards. Butch took it in stride, outwardly. Still cracking jokes, still calling train guards "sir," even while disarming them. But you saw the glances over his shoulder, the moments of silence between campfire stories. He was reading the wind, and he didn't like what it was whispering. You remember one night in particular, camped on the edge of an arroyo, listening to distant coyotes. Butch pulled out a newspaper and stared at his own face on the front page. "Doesn't even look like me," he muttered. Too serious. Then he smiled, folded the paper, and tossed it into the fire. "Still," he said, "I suppose I should look dangerous. Otherwise, where's the fun?" The next day, he robbed another bank. No one got hurt. A local kid asked for his autograph. Butch gave it. And that's what made him dangerous. Not his guns, not his gang, but the fact that when he walked into a room, you didn't know whether to run or shake his hand. You sit now, under a cottonwood, the evening air soft and full of dust. Butch is nearby, brushing his horse, whistling, calm, as if you're not wanted in 5 states. You look at him and wonder, what happens when the charm runs out? When the bullets start flying and the jokes stop landing? Because you've seen the line he walks. And it's getting thinner every day. The canyon walls echo with hoofbeats. Not yours, someone else's. Distant, but steady. You hold your breath. Listen close. Count the rhythm. Too many for coyotes. Too slow for deer. Too coordinated for ranch hands. Posse. You crouch behind a shale outcrop, heart thudding in sync with the thrum of approaching riders. Butch is beside you, rifle slung, eyes scanning the rocks like he's reading a map no one else can see. Sundance lays flat behind a boulder, already watching the rear trail. No panic, no whispers, just readiness. Because eventually, no matter how many flowers you pick, The thorns catch up. This is a shootout. You've had close calls before, wild dashes, near misses, the distant crack of rifles behind you. But this is one of those moments when the law isn't a rumor anymore. It's here, with spurs and loaded guns and orders not to miss. The Wild Bunch never wanted gunfights. Butch avoided them when he could. He believed escape was smarter than victory. But when cornered, you fought. You fought like animals with strategy. And this time, there's no canyon to slink through. No relay horses stashed nearby. It's rocks, sky, and lead. The first bullet sings over your head. Sundance returns fire, cool as sunrise. No panic in his breath. Just that terrifying stillness he gets when things turn deadly. Butch checks the distance. 5 riders. 6. No time to flee. He signals, hold the bluff. Draw them in. Move fast if they flank. Mainstream historical fact: the Wild Bunch were involved in several violent encounters with law enforcement, especially as the new century approached. While they tried to avoid shootouts, increasing pressure and bounties made them inevitable. One particularly deadly engagement occurred in Utah in 1897, where members of the gang killed a lawman and wounded 2 others before escaping into the wilderness. This fight doesn't make it into the papers, but it burns into your memory like a brand. Gunfire erupts from the ridge. You duck, fire back, feel the stock of your rifle kick against your shoulder. The rocks explode in dusty bursts. A horse screams. You're crouched next to Sundance now, both of you sweating through dust-crusted shirts, hearts thumping hard enough to count the seconds. Butch is yelling something, orders, maybe, or just a clever insult meant to throw the riders off. He once distracted a marshal mid-gunfight by yelling, "You missed, and you owe me a drink." Another bullet clips your hat, close enough to feel the air bend. You fire back, aiming low. Butcher's rule: don't kill unless there's no choice. Historians still argue whether that rule ever truly held up. Some say the Wild Bunch spilled more blood than they admitted. Others insist Butch kept a clean record, cleaner than most sheriffs. One scholar wrote, like many things in Butcher's world, the truth dance is just out of reach. One fringe detail: during a skirmish in Colorado, Butch reportedly used a pocket mirror to signal Sundance across a ridge, coordinating fire without shouting. It's clever, eccentric, exactly the sort of tactic Butch would dream up while the rest of you thought about breakfast. Today, though, there's no time for mirrors. Just dirt and fire. You and Sundance hold the left flank. Butch covers the right. Kid Curry, hot-headed but accurate, is further uphill, likely yelling something colorful as he reloads. A deputy's horse goes down. Another rider retreats, limping behind a boulder. You're not sure if anyone's dead. You're not sure you want to know. Butch tosses a rock to signal fallback. The ridge isn't worth dying for. You cover the retreat, ducking and firing, until finally, mercifully, the gunfire fades. The posse isn't pushing forward. Maybe they're wounded, maybe they're spooked, or maybe they're just tired of chasing men who don't bleed easy. You regroup in a dry wash a mile out. Sundance has a graze on his arm. Kid Curry is chewing on jerky like it insulted him. Butch wipes dust from his face, looking more annoyed than scared. That, he mutters, was impolite. Later, as you settle by the fire, Butch lays it out plain: there'll be more of these. And he's right. The Wild Bunch is getting famous in the wrong way. Once, you were the clever criminals who vanished into the horizon. Now you're targets, wanted, dangerous. The public still finds you fascinating, but the law wants you gone. And here's the thing no one tells you: gunfights don't make you feel brave. They make you feel tired, like every bullet steals a sliver of whatever calm you had left. Butch feels it, too. He's still smiling, still joking, but the pauses between his sentences are getting longer, like he's listening for footsteps in every silence. He starts changing tactics: fewer daytime robberies, more night movement. He updates maps obsessively, revises exit plans every week. Sundance grows quieter. He's always been the anchor, but now he moves like someone waiting for something to snap. You find yourself sleeping with your boots on more often. One night, around the fire, Butch tells a story about a man who robbed banks using a trained dog to deliver notes. It's probably made up, but you laugh anyway. Then he grows quiet and adds, "At least the dog didn't miss." You all go quiet after that. Because deep down, you know these moments are numbered. The law is adapting, your luck is shrinking, and the shootouts, they're not rare anymore, they're becoming part of the job. You clean your rifle in the dark, listening to Butch hum some off-key tune. And you wonder, not if another shootout is coming, but when. The sky over Montana is bruised with lavender and gold when she rides into camp. You hear her horse before you see her, a soft, rhythmic clop, the kind that tells you the rider is confident, not rushing. Sundance lifts his head slightly. Butch is already smiling, not that wide, goofy grin he reserves for maps and heists, but something quieter, softer. Her name is Etta Place. And whatever you think you know about her, you're probably wrong. There are no grand announcements, no introductions shouted across camp. She dismounts, adjusts her gloves, and nods once, calm, unbothered, and probably smarter than half the crew combined. Maybe all of it. She's the only woman the Wild Bunch ever let ride with them full time. That alone tells you everything. Historians still argue about who she really was. A schoolteacher from Texas, a prostitute from Fort Worth, a runaway aristocrat, a Pinkerton spy. There's no definitive proof. Her past is a fog. Even in government records, the only thing people agree on, she was beautiful and dangerous. She wasn't loud, didn't need to be. Etta carried herself like someone who'd already decided what room belonged to her before walking into it. You remember the first night she shared the fire. Butch told some rambling story about a blind mule that outran a train. Everyone laughed. Etta just shook her head and said, "Next time, try one with legs." Butch laughed harder than the rest of you. Sundance didn't say much either. He and Etta sat together, not in a lovey-dovey, saddle movie kind of way, but like two people who'd already had all the meaningful conversations and were now perfectly fine with the silence. A mainstream fact, Etta Place and Sundance Kid lived together in South America for several years under assumed names. At one point, they bought land in Patagonia, attempting to go straight. For a time, it actually worked. No gunfights, no posses, just cattle and fences and wide open sky. But that's later. Right now, you're watching her clean a rifle faster than any man in the group. Kid Curry grumbles about it. Etta doesn't flinch. She just says, "Clean guns don't jam," and tosses the cloth into his lap. Even Butch raises his eyebrows at that one. Some fringe stories claim she was a better shot than Sundance. Others say she was trained by a Pinkerton in disguise. There's even a tale that she rode with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show for a summer before vanishing. You'd call it fantasy if you hadn't seen her ride and shoot and out-debate Elsie Lay on how best to secure a canyon hideout. She becomes part of the operation, not just a hanger-on. She helps plan, scouts terrain, offers insights Butch didn't consider. Practical things, like how long a horse can carry 2 bags of coins before going lame. Or what towns have sympathetic store owners who'll look the other way. And you can tell Butch admires her. Not romantically, not exactly. It's more like watching someone finally find a worthy chess opponent in a room full of checkers players. Sundance, though, he watches her differently. He always did. There's a moment, maybe 2 weeks after she arrives, when you spot them sitting on a ridge at sunset. No words, just the wind, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting gently on her knee. A moment so fragile it almost doesn't belong in a story like this. It makes you feel like an intruder just seeing it. Their relationship is quiet, but real, not flashy, not performative. They don't kiss in front of the crew. They don't bicker like bad novels want him to. They just are, in sync, like Butch and Sundance, but different, warmer, a reminder that even outlaws want soft things sometimes. Etta brings calm, she brings focus. The camp grows quieter, more organized. You eat better, plan better, you even stop arguing over coffee rations. mostly because Etta starts rationing it for you. Butch is invigorated. A new plan's forming, one that takes all of you further than before. A different country, a different life. It's Etta. Really? Who makes it possible? She's the one who suggests heading south. Argentina. No extradition treaty. Fresh starts. New names. Land to buy. Horses to raise. At first, it sounds like fantasy. Then you see the glint in Butch's eye. The one that usually shows up before a heist. Except this time, it's not about taking, it's about building. It's Sundance who buys the tickets. Butch secures the funds. You help move supplies. And Etta, she starts drawing maps again. This time of pastures instead of train tracks. You've never seen her smile like that before. There's a tension in the air now, but it's different. Not fear, not heat of the moment nerves. Something deeper, like standing on the edge of a cliff with the wind behind you. Unsure if it'll carry or drop you. Historians still debate why they went to South America at all. Were they running, retiring, laying low, or building something new? The answer's murky, as always. But from where you sit, it's clear. They were chasing a future, not escaping a past. One night, by the fire, Etta looks up from the stars and says, "What would you do if this all ended tomorrow?" You don't have an answer. None of you do. And that silence, it says more than 100 gunfights ever could. The ship rocks beneath your boots as you lean on the rail, watching the Atlantic breathe in moonlight. Argentina is still days away, but it feels closer than anything behind you. Butch stands near the bow, arms crossed, a strange stillness in him, as if he's trying to imagine what it'll feel like to stop running. Etta leans into Sundance's shoulder, the two of them sharing a flask. No one's smiling quite yet. You're not there yet, but the idea of a new start has taken root. South America, the plan isn't a fantasy anymore. It's booked, packed, underway. Mainstream historical fact. In 1901, Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, and Etta Place sailed to Buenos Aires under assumed names, James Ryan, Harry A. Place, and Mrs. Ethel Place, respectively. They purchased land in Patagonia, opened a modest ranch, and lived for a time as upstanding, tax-paying citizens. And for a while, it worked. The land was wild, green, and hard. You'd think going from bank robbing to herding sheep would dull the edge. But there's something raw and satisfying about it. Fences to build, hooves to tend, animals to chase. You're dirty by noon and too tired to worry by dusk. Butch thrived. He learned Spanish quickly, traded with neighbors, even hosted the occasional dinner. His charm crossed borders. Smiles and sarcasm didn't require translation. He played cards with local ranchers, sold livestock with flair, and once fixed a neighbor's windmill just to see if he could. Sundance adapted too, though you could tell he was always watching the hills. Old habits die slow. He taught the gauchos how to shoot tin cans off fence posts. Etta planted a garden. She baked. She read. She walked with the calm of someone finally putting down roots. It was a fragile peace. But it was peace, for the first time in years. You slept without your boots on. And then someone sent a letter. A fringe story claims it came from a former gang member. Another version says it was a Pinkerton agent who spotted Etta in a market. Either way, someone noticed, someone whispered, and the past, like it always does, took the next ship south. Butch received a telegram, short, blunt, names known, agents dispatched. You saw him fold it slowly, as if the delay would buy him more time. He didn't panic, but the jokes stopped for a while. The laughter thinned. Even Etta grew quiet, her eyes scanning the road more often than the clouds. Sundance paced at night. The ranch continued. Of course, animals needed feeding. Fences needed mending. But you all moved like shadows were creeping up your spines. Historians still argue whether Butch ever truly believed they could retire in Patagonia. Some say it was a stopgap, not a finish line. Others believe he wanted it, really wanted it, to be permanent. You're not sure. He was good with a hammer and a map, but you never saw him plant anything he didn't expect to leave behind. Then came the first robbery. Not yours. Someone else hit a bank in nearby Rio Gallegos. The descriptions, vague. 2 Americans. Clean shots. Polite. Sound familiar. Whether it was you or not didn't matter. The buzz started. Suddenly, you were those Americans. The new men with clean boots and too many coins. Butch called a meeting that night. You all stood beneath the stars. Hands on hips or folded across chests. No one talking over the wind. Maybe we just live with it, LZ said. Butch shook his head. We didn't come here to hide. We came here to breathe. Sundance lit a cigarette. Breathing's a lot harder when they've got rifles pointed at your chest. Eventually, a decision was made. One last job, maybe 2, to secure cash and disappear deeper south. Maybe Chile, maybe even Europe. Butch started planning again, not with excitement, but with precision. Like a man who knows the stakes have finally become real. You helped, because what else do you do when ghosts come calling? The target? A mining company payroll near a remote town. Sparse defenses, limited law presence, horses staged, disguises packed. Etta would stay behind, run the ranch, prepare for whatever came next. She didn't argue, but her eyes never left Sundance the whole night before you rode out. You remember what she said to you quietly, while the others packed saddles. Watch him. He won't ask for help, but he'll need it. You nodded. You meant it. And so you rode. Again. There was something strange about doing it all over again. In another country, under another sky. The plan was tight. The payout would be solid. Enough to vanish. For real this time. But the air felt heavier. Like you were reenacting an old story that everyone already knew the ending to. Butch didn't crack jokes that day. Sundance barely spoke. And you listened to the wind and hoped it didn't know your name. The sky above Bolivia is unforgiving, flat, white, bleached like an old bone left too long in the sun. You ride fast, but the dust rides faster. It clings to your teeth, your boots, your thoughts. This isn't the friendly openness of Patagonia. This is a land where even the birds seem suspicious. You're halfway between a silver mine and a dream that's slipping. Butch rides ahead, silent for once. Sundance beside him, scanning the hills. You follow. The saddlebags heavier than usual, full of paper money, gold coins, and the unspoken weight of knowing this might be the last time you ride anywhere at all. The robbery had gone mostly right. Mostly. The payroll wagon was smaller than expected. No guards, no shots fired, just a quiet stop, a stern-faced driver, and a sack of Bolivian currency that smelled faintly of mildew and despair. You didn't even feel the usual rush. There was no clever banter, no last-minute surprise, just quiet. But something had shifted. A worker recognized Sundance, or thought he did. That was enough. Whispers spread like spilled kerosene. By nightfall, posters were appearing in mining towns. Tall foreigners, armed, possibly the same Americans involved in the Rio Gallegos hit. The descriptions were vague, but so was the law down here. That didn't make it safer, just messier. Mainstream historical fact: in 1908, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were implicated in the robbery of the payroll for the Arameo, Frankie and Sia Mining Company near the town of Tupiza, Bolivia. Though evidence was circumstantial, Bolivian authorities mobilized immediately. You remember passing through San Vicente that night, a dusty speck of a village surrounded by rust-colored hills and mistrustful faces. The kind of place where silence isn't peaceful, it's accusatory. Sundance wanted to keep moving. Butch voted to rest the horses. And you, stuck between reason and exhaustion, agreed to hole up in a rented adobe house at the edge of town. It wasn't smart, but it was human. The house was simple. One room, a table, 3 chairs, and a cot that creaked like a confession every time someone moved. The walls were thick, the windows small. You posted a watch, rotating, alert, rifles always close. Etta had stayed behind in Argentina. You remember Sundance staring at the window for hours, as if he could somehow see her through it. Butch sat at the table most of the night, scribbling something in a notebook. Maybe a plan, maybe a letter. You never found out. The next morning, a child ran through town shouting something in Spanish. Then another. Then a man rode past at a gallop. It didn't take long to realize they weren't celebrating the weather. The Bolivian army was on its way. Fringe reports vary. Some say it was soldiers. Others say local police with borrowed rifles. A few claim the Pinkertons were involved, operating quietly from the shadows, coordinating from abroad. Historians still argue whether that last part is true. Official Pinkerton records claim they lost track of Butch and Sundance after they left Argentina. But in every story, the shadows seem to follow them. You saw the soldiers first, 6 of them. Then 8, creeping toward the house like wolves that just smelled wounded prey. Rifles raised, boots crunching on salt-dusted ground. Butch watched them from the narrow window. Not exactly a welcoming committee. He said. Sundance checked his ammo. Calm, always calm. You wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The first shot shattered the window. Then another. You returned fire instinctively. The sound in that tiny house was deafening. Rifles cracking like thunder against adobe and fear. Sundance moved between windows like a dancer. Methodical, never panicked. Butch took position at the door, firing in controlled bursts. One soldier went down, another ducked behind a boulder. The siege had begun. The house groaned with every blast. Dust rained from the ceiling. The air grew thick with smoke and heat and something metallic. You thought about Etta, about hole in the wall, about horses tied up in cottonwood shade and laughing around a campfire that no longer existed. Butch kept checking the door. Sundance kept checking the clock. You kept checking your pulse. Then, just after midnight, it went quiet. No footsteps, no shots, just wind. Butch whispered, "They're waiting." Sundance sat by the window, revolver in his lap. Let them. There's a version of this story where you all survived. Slipped out the back, rode into the hills, faked your deaths and lived to old age in Paraguay or France or Texas under new names. But the version most agree on is darker. 2 men, surrounded, injured, with no escape. One final burst of gunfire in the night. And silence. Mainstream accounts report 2 bodies found in the house the next morning. One with a head wound. One shot through the chest. Locals claimed the taller man shot the other to spare him capture, then turned the gun on himself. Historians still argue whether those 2 men were Butch and Sundance. The bodies were buried quickly. No photos, no autopsy, no DNA, just graves marked with rumors. Some say it wasn't them, that they escaped, that they faked the shootout, that they lived out their days under assumed names. One theory even suggests Butch returned to Utah in secret and lived into the 1930s as a reclusive cattle rancher. You don't know the truth. All you know is that when the sun rose over San Vicente, 2 men were gone, and so was something else, the hope that outlaws could outrun their stories forever. Dust blows across the Bolivian plain, catching in your throat as you stare down at 2 freshly dug mounds. No markers, no names. Just soil packed tight over myth and gunpowder. You didn't think it would end like this. Sundance, the one who always saw it coming, gone in a moment that no one witnessed. Butch, the one with a plan for everything, outmaneuvered not by bullets, but by time. You stand there, boots rooted in foreign dirt, wondering if the silence left behind is louder than any gunfight they ever lived through. Except, there's that part of you that doesn't believe it. Not fully, because something about it feels off. Too quick, too clean, too un-Butch. It's not just you, either. Stories spread fast. Within days of the San Vicente shootout, locals whispered inconsistencies. Why weren't the bodies photographed? Why no public display? Why did the army bury them so fast? Fringe accounts sprouted like weeds. One said the bodies were misidentified, that the 2 dead men were actually Chilean bandits, roughly the same height, wearing American boots, but otherwise strangers to the legends. Another claimed that Butch and Sundance bribed a local official and escaped in the confusion, riding out through a hidden canyon with new names and clean slates. Historians still debate it, heatedly. Some cling to the Bolivian records. Others point to conflicting dental reports, gaps in the timeline, or eyewitnesses who changed their stories. A few even suggest Etta Place returned years later, looking for someone, or something. Meanwhile, back in the United States, the Wild Bunch is fading into legend. Slowly, sadly, banks get rebuilt, trains run on time, Pinkertons close their case files, some reluctantly, some with smug satisfaction, and yet, rumors echo louder than bullets. In the years that follow, you hear whispers. A tall man seen in Mexico, calling himself James, didn't drink, polite, had a fondness for maps. An older rancher in Utah, quiet, kind, suspiciously well-funded, always paid in cash, never talked about the past. And a woman, Etta, boarding a steamer from Buenos Aires alone, disappeared completely after 1909. Some say she joined a convent. Some say she married a German doctor. Others swear she returned to the States under a false name, carrying a small, tattered journal with initials no one recognized. You keep listening for the truth like it's a train you'll hear before you see. But it never arrives. You think back to the final job, the one in Bolivia. It wasn't flashy, there were no safe blasting explosions, no leaping from moving boxcars. Just a slow, careful theft, methodical, simple. It didn't feel like a climax. It felt like punctuation, not an exclamation, maybe an ellipsis. That's what gnaws at you. Butch Cassidy, the man who choreographed crimes like they were ballroom dances, wouldn't have gone down in a half-crumbling adobe without a backup plan. He had decoy routes for decoy routes, safe houses for safe houses, an exit behind every entrance. Even when nothing was burning, he knew where the smoke would go. And Sundance, he wouldn't have allowed it, not without a fight that left the landscape scarred. You saw neither scar nor smoke, just two quiet graves. Mainstream historical fact. In 1991, forensic experts attempted to exhume the alleged grave of the Sundance Kid in San Vicente. DNA testing was inconclusive. No match to known Sundance family samples. No match to anyone. Really, the mystery remained muddy as ever. So maybe they died there. Maybe not. Maybe Butch really was buried with a bullet in his brain and a joke on his lips. Or maybe, just maybe, he rode away. You remember him once saying, "The best trick I ever pulled was being underestimated." And you think, was that the trick? Was Bolivia the curtain call for an act that ended backstage? Butch always said he wanted out. Not to go out in a blaze, but to fade out, quietly, preferably with a herd of horses and a good chair to lean back in. You wonder if he got it. Some nights, you imagine him sitting on a porch somewhere, listening to the wind instead of sirens, drinking coffee instead of plotting heists, maybe writing letters he never sends, maybe reading the papers, laughing at the stories about himself, about Butch Cassidy, the ghost the Pinkertons could never quite catch. You remember his rules: no unnecessary violence, no betrayal, always say thank you. He didn't break those rules. And maybe that's why he got away. Or maybe not. Maybe all you're chasing is smoke from a fire that went out long ago. Either way, you're still looking, because you need to know if the legend really ended in that dusty room, or if it just changed names and rode on ahead, smiling. The trail's gone cold. Years have passed since San Vicente, and you've been chasing shadows ever since. Some days, it feels like Butch and Sundance are still riding out there, one canyon ahead, one name behind, always just out of reach. Other days, it feels like they were never real to begin with. You walk through ghost towns now, real ones, old mining camps with busted saloons and bullet holes still etched in the walls. Places where someone might have whispered their names once. Places where someone still might. In one of them, a woman tells you she met a man years ago, tall, polite, blue-eyed. He paid for his coffee with gold coins, asked about rail schedules, and left before sunset. Didn't say where he was headed. Wore a hat like it belonged to someone else. She called him Cass. Could have been anyone, but your stomach does that flip. The one you get when something's almost too convenient to be a lie. You nod. Tip your hat, and ride on. Back in the States, the debates become academic. Scholars dig through telegrams, bank ledgers, and Bolivian police reports like paleontologists brushing bones. Books are published, panels are hosted, photos are compared. Everyone wants to be the one who knows, but no one does. Mainstream historical fact: in the early 20th century, several individuals in the western U.S. claimed to have seen or even spoken to Butch Cassidy after his alleged death in Bolivia. One of the most persistent stories came from a man named William T. Phillips, who lived in Spokane, Washington. His family claimed he was Butch, older, quieter, going by another name, but the evidence, mixed, unconfirmed, tempting. You read about Phillips in a dusty archive. Same height, same eyes, shared mannerisms, wrote a manuscript about an outlaw's life that sounded suspiciously first-hand. One historian called it the most poetic con in outlaw history. Another said, simply, it fits too well to ignore. Butch would have enjoyed that. The idea of historians arguing over whether he had the last laugh. Sundance, he's quieter in the legend. Fewer sightings, fewer theories, but one story stands out. A man in Chile claimed to have fixed a saddle for a silent American who paid in silver, refused to remove his hat, and had a scar that looked exactly like the one Sundance got back in El Paso. No name, no questions. Butch once said Sundance wasn't afraid of death, just didn't want it to be noisy. If that was him, he got his wish. Still, San Vicente casts a long shadow. The official version says they died there. The Bolivian authorities buried 2 foreign men. Case closed. But here's the thing: when you dig into the details, you start to notice gaps. Missing documents, conflicting witness statements, the payroll money from the robbery, never recovered. Fringe speculation stretches even further. Some believe the entire event was staged by the Bolivians to cover a botched arrest. Others claim the Pinkertons arranged a secret deal, capture the men alive, fake their deaths, extract intelligence about criminal networks. Wild, sure, but this is Butch Cassidy we're talking about. If anyone could pull it off, it's the man who made robbing banks look like theater. Historians still argue whether that final shootout even happened the way it's told. The house may have been empty. The bullets may have come from inside. One even suggested Butch and Sundance were never in the house at all, just nearby, watching the chaos unfold before slipping away like smoke. If true, that would be the greatest trick of all, faking your end so convincingly that history wrote the final chapter for you. And you're still not sure, because every so often, someone says they saw 2 older men riding together, one smiling, one silent, always headed somewhere quieter, because every so often, a new name appears in a dusty registry: James Ryan, William T. Phillips, Santiago Maxwell, and someone somewhere starts wondering all over again, because every so often, a silver coin with an 1890 mint turns up in a place it doesn't belong. And you start thinking about that ranch in Patagonia, the garden Etta planted, the map Butch drew of a place he called La Ultima Ruta, the last road. You think about that map a lot, because maybe it wasn't the end. Maybe San Vicente was just the smoke bomb. Maybe Butch and Sundance did die there. Or maybe they're still riding. Older now, slower, but free. You can't prove it, no one can. But some truths aren't meant to be nailed down. Some truths ride the wind. And this one never stops. There's a poster nailed to the wall of an old train depot in Wyoming, faded, water-stained, the corners curling like dried leaves. You brush off the dust. There he is, that same crooked grin, that same narrow face under a batted hat. Wanted, Robert Leroy Parker, alias Butch Cassidy. It's strange, seeing the man you rode with immortalized in ink and exaggeration. The reward amount is high. The accusations are mostly accurate. But the eyes on that poster, they don't match the man who once helped an old woman load sacks of flour after robbing her employer. You step back, shake your head, and smile, because what Butch left behind wasn't just mystery, it was legacy. He became legend not because he was the fastest draw or the bloodiest bandit, but because he broke the mold. An outlaw who wrote thank you notes, who avoided violence like other men avoided taxes, who saw crime not as chaos, but as structure. Mainstream historical fact: Butch Cassidy remains one of the most romanticized outlaws in American history. His exploits have been adapted into books, TV series, documentaries, and most famously, the 1969 film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford. That movie revived global interest in the duo, and, in a twist Butch would have loved, turned them into international celebrities more than 6 decades after their supposed deaths. And what a performance it was: funny, smooth, stylish. The movie Butch cracks wise while robbing banks, rides a bicycle with Etta to jaunty music, and dies in a blaze of cinematic glory. It's a beautiful lie, or maybe a soft-edged truth. Butch might have laughed at that bicycle scene. Sundance definitely would have groaned. Still, the film did more than entertain. It resurrected 2 men history was already trying to bury. It made people ask questions again, open case files, dig up graves, reconsider the weight of dust and rumor. One fringe detail: after the film's release, a man in Arizona came forward claiming to be Butch's nephew. He offered letters, allegedly written by Butch in the 1930s, from a cabin in Oregon. Most historians dismissed them, others didn't. The handwriting matched, the tone felt right, the details, uncannily specific. Butch Cassidy wasn't just a man. He became a genre. Sundance faded more into the margins. Less charismatic, less quotable, but no less respected. The strong, silent type. In dime novels, he's always the one with the final bullet, the last word, the ultimate sacrifice. Historians still argue whether that narrative does him justice. He was more than a sidekick, more than a sharpshooter. He was a man who wanted a quiet life with a woman who understood him, and who followed his best friend into the fire anyway. And Etta Place, she remains the greatest enigma of all. No verified photographs beyond a few blurry passport shots. No grave, no family traced, just whispers. A woman who walked beside 2 legends, then vanished like smoke through a canyon. Some say she joined a convent. Others claim she remarried. One rumor says she went back to teaching. Children sitting at desks while their schoolmistress carried secrets bigger than the Rockies. In the end, all 3 became figures of unanswered questions. People don't just want to know them, they want to understand them. And that's what keeps their story alive. You think about Butch often. Not the poster version, not the movie version, the real one. The man who wiped the dust off your coat before a robbery. Who shared his last cup of coffee with a kid who barely knew which way was north. Who once climbed a tree just to steal apples for the whole crew. Laughing like a teenager the entire time. He wasn't perfect. He stole, he lied, he dragged people into danger. But he meant something to the men who rode with him, and maybe to the people he robbed, too. Because Butch Cassidy didn't take everything. He left things behind. A good story, a better smile, and that strange, nagging question: what if he made it? That's the power of a legacy. It doesn't need confirmation, just possibility. You visit Hole in the Wall once more, now a historical site. Quiet, preserved. There's a plaque explaining the outlaws who used to hide there. Tourists take pictures, unaware that the ghosts never really left. You sit on a flat rock near the edge of the canyon. The same place Butch once tied his horse before a heist. You imagine him sitting beside you, legs stretched, hat low, drawing escape routes in the dirt with a stick. And for a moment, it's like nothing ever ended. The wind picks up, whispers in your ear, not in words, but in memory. You still riding. You ride the old trail one last time, slow, deliberate, letting your horse pick its way through familiar terrain. The canyon walls echo with things you thought you'd forgotten, laughter by the fire, the clink of coins in a canvas sack, the far-off snap of gunfire, the way Butch always hummed before a job like he was tuning the world to his frequency. You've come full circle, not just on the map, but in the mind. Every outlaw's story fades eventually, either into history books or grave markers. But Butch Cassidy's, it lingers. Because you're not just chasing a man. You're chasing something larger. A question, a feeling, an idea that maybe, just maybe, a person can live outside the lines. Write their own code, break every rule and still sleep soundly under the stars. You remember the first time Butch handed you a map. No names, no legend, just his notes, arrows, squiggles, stars. If you get separated, he said, follow the water, don't trust fences, and never ride into a town on payday. Sounded like a joke, wasn't. The Wild Bunch isn't a gang anymore. It's a story passed between dusty fingers. A name scribbled in saloon ledgers. A pair of boots nailed above a bar in New Mexico. An old woman in Patagonia who keeps a silver coin in a box marked for the Americans. Mainstream historical fact: there's no definitive proof of Butch Cassidy's death. The Bolivian authorities offered a conclusion, but no autopsy, no DNA, just rumors, retellings, and a whole lot of inconsistencies. In 2022, another failed attempt was made to match remains to known descendants. Still nothing. The legend stands. Historians still argue whether that's what Butch wanted. Immortality through ambiguity. An outlaw who left just enough smoke behind to keep us looking for the fire. The truth is, you don't need a grave to be remembered. Not if the world keeps whispering your name every time a bank door creaks open or a train pulls into a station 5 minutes late. Not if kids still shout, "I'm Butch Cassidy," as they leap from fences with cardboard saddles strapped to their backs. Not if the Pinkertons still hate that they never closed the file. You wonder if Butch ever imagined this. If, under all the charm and clever escapes, he knew his real trick wasn't getting away with it. It was staying alive in our minds. One story, 15,000 steps. And here you are, at the edge of it, looking back. Maybe he died in that Bolivian house. Maybe he died decades later under a different name. Alone and content. Maybe he's still out there, old now, slow, telling lies in a border town bar that sounds suspiciously close to the truth. You'll never know. But as long as you wonder, as long as you ride the trail in your thoughts, Butch Cassidy rides with you. The horses are gone now. The fire's down to soft embers. You can hear crickets, quiet and steady, and the faint rustle of dry grass moving with the breeze. Whatever chase you were on, it's over for now. Let your shoulders drop. Take a long breath. In, out. We've wandered far tonight, across dusty plains and silver-streaked mountains, through shootouts and whispers, across borders and question marks. You've ridden with legends, sat by outlaws, listened to laughter in places where danger and dreams blurred together. But it's okay to let it fade now. Let the silhouettes of Butch and Sundance melt back into the night. Let the mysteries settle like silt in a still pond. You don't need all the answers. Sometimes, the not knowing is what makes the story last. Your saddle's behind you now. The gun's in the holster. The map can wait. All that matters is the hush. So close your eyes if they haven't already drifted. Let your breathing slow with the rhythm of a distant train you'll never quite see. Somewhere out there, Butch is tipping his hat and walking off into that last wide horizon. A smile on his face, a plan in his pocket, and dust on his boots. And you're home, safe, warm, story told, legend laid down. Good night, partner. Sleep deep.